Welcome back to Fame Files, everyone. We're on episode 45, and today we're diving into the career and opinions of, well, John Nettles, Bergerac, Inspector Barnaby. You know him, right? He's kind of a legend when it comes to British detective dramas. But here's the thing. The man himself says he can't even watch his old shows.
Yeah, I read that too. It's more than just, not wanting to relive the past. It's like he compares watching himself to, well, seeing another actor pretending to be a dead body. Can you imagine after all those years, all those murder mysteries?
It is a little strange to think about, isn't it? I mean, you'd think he'd want to see those iconic roles again. Maybe it's about wanting to create some distance,
Yeah.
you know? Especially now that he's retired, maybe he needs that space for new experiences. Like, could he be, I don't know, a bit over the genre?
It's definitely possible. He even compares acting in those shows to building a wall. Like once you spent years doing it, who wants to watch someone else do the same thing, right?
Makes sense. But this actually brings up another point, something Nettles has been pretty outspoken about. The way detective dramas have changed, especially when it comes to violence.
Oh, right. He's not a fan of how particularly violence against women is portrayed in modern shows.
Yeah, he uses words like obligatory and gratuitous, which is, well, pretty strong. And he makes this contrast with Midsomer Murders, you know, how the murders were so over the top, almost theatrical.
Right, like almost cartoonish in a way.
Exactly. So I'm not saying violence against women should be taken lightly, but I do wonder, is Nettles maybe looking back with a bit of nostalgia? I mean, we've all been guilty of that, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's always that temptation to see the past through rose-colored glasses, right?
Right. But it does make you think, what's the balance,
Yeah,
between reflecting real-world issues and still providing entertainment?
that's the million-dollar question. And then there's the whole question of diversity in casting. How has that evolved since Nettles' early days? I mean, Bergerac, which was back in the 80s, actually had a more diverse cast from the start.
That's true. Floella Benjamin was in that, right?
Yes. And in a pretty prominent role, too.
So it really makes you think, what do we even mean by realistic portrayals? Where do we draw the line?
Yeah, it's a complex issue, that's for sure.
And speaking of complex issues, remember that Midsomer Murders controversy back in 2011?
Oh, with the producer, right?
Yeah, when he said the show wouldn't work with ethnic minorities because it's supposed to be a traditional English village.
Oh, yeah, that didn't go over well.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And while Nettles believes it was just a slip of the tongue, it did spark a huge debate about representation on screen, whether it feels forced or authentic, And Nettles actually has similar thoughts about diversity in theater as well.
He's worried that sometimes it can feel like social engineering, like they're just ticking boxes instead of finding the best actor for the role. He's very much about talent first, regardless of background.
Which makes you wonder how his own background shaped his perspective. Growing up as an adopted child in a working-class mining town, I mean, that must have had an impact.
Oh, absolutely. He actually talks about how that upbringing gave him this working class chappy mentality where he saw everything as a fight, a confrontation. And now he even regrets not recognizing opportunities early on because of that mindset.
It really makes you think, right? How much do our backgrounds shape the way we see the world, the way we see our own potential?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
But before we get too deep into that, let's circle back to Bergerac for a second. Did you know they actually offered Nettles a cameo in the reboot?
They did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, but he turned it down. Said he didn't want to muddy the waters. Seems like he's happy to let the new Bergerac, Damien Moloney, do his own thing.
Which is interesting because I remember reading that Nettles had some doubts about the reboot initially, especially when they were considering making his character, a washed-up alcoholic.
Oh, wow, really? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, but since then, he's actually praised Maloney's performance, said he brings a new energy to the role, which I think is great. Like, he's passing the torch, acknowledging that times have changed.
Yeah, and that sometimes a fresh perspective is what's needed. It makes you think about the balance between honoring a legacy and, well, allowing for reinvention. What do you think? Would you have wanted to see Nettles make a cameo? Or is it better for reboots to stand on their own?
That's a tough one. I can see both sides. On the one hand, it would be fun to see him back in the role, even for a brief moment. But on the other hand, I get why he wouldn't want to overshadow the new actor. I guess it depends on how they would have handled it.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, that's for sure. Speaking of new takes on old roles, Nettles has some pretty strong opinions about acting these days.
Yeah, he does. It's like he sees a lot of superficiality, not a lot of depth.
And it's not just TV. He's talked about theater, too, like casting women as Prospero in The Tempest.
Oh, right. He wasn't a fan of that.
He's not against like gender-bending roles entirely, but he thinks it should be done thoughtfully, not just to make a statement, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. It's about serving the story, right? Not just trying to be trendy.
Exactly. And it kind of ties back to his views on diversity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's all for more representation, but he's worried it can turn into just checking boxes instead of actually finding the best person for the role.
Talent first. That's his motto. But getting back to Nettles' career for a second, did you know just how popular Midsomer Murders is around the world?
Oh, it's huge, isn't it? I
Hmm.
think I read somewhere that there's a 247 Midsomer Murders channel in the U.S.
Yeah. And there's this rumor that David Cameron and Angela Merkel, like, took a break from a meeting to watch an episode.
Oh, come on, really?
That's hilarious.
Yeah, right. It just shows you the power of those British detective dramas. It's true. What is it about them, do you think? The quirky characters, the settings, or just the whole puzzle of it all?
I think it's a mix of everything. It's escapism, you know?
Yeah.
A world where justice always wins and the puzzles are always solvable.
Makes sense. And for international audiences, I guess it's a little peek into English life, too.
Yeah, maybe a bit idealized, but still. But, despite all the success on TV, Nettles seems to really value his stage work, especially with the Royal Shakespeare Company.
It's interesting, isn't it? He finds his fulfillment in theater, even though TV made him famous.
Yeah, he's talked about the collaboration, the connection with a live audience. It's a whole different energy.
It is. And speaking of different energies, it's pretty cool how open Nettles is about fame. The impact it's had on his life.
He's mentioned getting suggestive fan mail, especially back in his Bergerac days.
Oh, yeah, I read that, too.
Yeah.
It's funny how fame can create this, fictional persona, isn't it?
Totally. Like this image that doesn't always match reality. I think his first wife even found it amusing.
Oh, right. She thought fans had the wrong idea about him.
Exactly. And with social media now, I bet it's even harder for actors to manage that disconnect.
Oh, absolutely. Can you imagine having your every move scrutinized by millions of people?
Yeah, it's a whole other level of pressure.
For sure. And it kind of brings us back to one of Nettles' biggest criticisms, doesn't it? That modern entertainment is all about sensationalism, blurring the lines between what's real and what's not.
Yeah, he's worried about the impact on viewers, especially younger ones.
Like we're being bombarded with shock value instead of substance.
Right. And he doesn't think we should exploit real-life trauma for entertainment.
It's a tough line to walk, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't want to shy away from difficult topics, but we also have to be responsible.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance. But speaking of challenges, Nettles has talked about his own regrets.
Oh, yeah, like not recognizing opportunities early in his career.
He blames it on his background, working class, always feeling like he had to fight for everything.
Right. And he sees that confidence in actors from more privileged backgrounds, which must be tough.
It is. It makes you think about how our past shapes our choices, doesn't it?
It really does. And it makes you wonder how many talented people are out there feeling like they're facing an uphill battle.
So many, probably. But shifting gears a bit, what did you think about Nettles' advice for aspiring actors?
I thought it was pretty insightful, actually. He really stressed confidence, which makes sense given his own experiences.
Yeah, and he talked about being observant, studying human behavior, finding the truth in every character.
And those practical tips, like being prepared for auditions, networking. It's clear he wants to help the next generation.
Yeah, like he's paying it forward, making up for those missed opportunities by empowering others.
Absolutely. And that part about recognizing and taking advantage of opportunities, that really resonated with me.
Yeah, he's all about taking risks, not letting fear hold you back.
Which is a great message for anyone, not just actors, right?
Totally. It's about pushing yourself, even when it's scary.
And knowing that failure is just part of the journey. But you know what we haven't talked about yet? Nettles' views on streaming services. He's got some pretty strong opinions there, too.
Oh, right. He's kind of got this love-hate thing going on, doesn't he?
He does. He likes the wider reach, the accessibility, but he's worried about quality suffering for quantity.
And the fragmentation of audiences, too. Like everyone's watching different things.
Right. And he couldn't believe there's a 247 Midsomer Murders channel. Like, who's watching that all day?
It's a different world now, isn't it? Back then, TV was an event, something you shared with others.
Now it's all on demand.
Yeah.
Personalized.
Exactly. And maybe that's part of why Nettles doesn't like watching his old shows.
Like the whole context has changed the way we watch.
It's not the same experience anymore. It's like trying to recapture a feeling that's gone.
Yeah, the world's moved on. But to be fair to Nettles, he does see the good side of streaming too.
Oh, yeah. He likes that smaller productions can find an audience, that there's more diversity.
And he even admitted to enjoying some streaming shows himself, which I thought was funny.
It shows that even someone who's critical can still appreciate new things.
Exactly. It's about being open to change while still holding on to your values.
And that's a great lesson from John Nettles, isn't it? The ability to evolve, to question, to adapt.
While staying true to yourself,
Yeah.
he's proof that a career in the arts is a journey, not a destination.
A lifelong journey of exploration and growth.
And on that note, I think we need a quick break. We'll be back soon to wrap up our deep dive into the world of John Nettles. So we've been talking about John Nettles, and wow, he's really given us a lot to think about, hasn't he?
He has. I mean, it's one thing to have a long career like his, but to be so outspoken too, it's refreshing.
And he doesn't hold back on his criticisms either, especially when it comes to how violence is shown nowadays, particularly towards women.
Yeah, he's not afraid to call it out.
He thinks it's become too much, like it's there just for shock value, not because it's actually needed for the story.
Which makes you wonder, right? Are we getting too used to seeing violence on screen?
I think it's a valid question, and it ties into what Nettles believes about art in general.
That it should have meaning and purpose, not just be about mindless entertainment.
Exactly. Like, remember what he said about casting women as Prospero?
Yeah, he felt it messed with the whole father-daughter relationship in The Tempest.
Right. And even with diversity in casting, he supports it, of course, but
He's wary of it being more about checking boxes than genuine representation.
yeah, like forcing it just to look good rather than what makes sense for the story.
It's a tricky issue for sure, but it's good that he's bringing it up.
It is.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is that he also sees the good side of things, like with streaming services.
Oh yeah, he's not completely against progress.
He knows they can give smaller productions a chance and reach a wider audience.
It's like he recognizes both the good and the bad, you know? Doesn't shy away from the complexity of it all.
Exactly. He makes you think critically about things, not just accept them at face value.
Which is what makes him so interesting to listen to, I think.
Absolutely. And he's so open about his own journey, too. The ups and downs, the pressures of fame, even his regrets.
Like he wants to share his experience and maybe help others avoid those same pitfalls.
Yeah, that advice about confidence, recognizing opportunities, that's something we can all learn from.
It's not just for actors. It's about going for what you want in life, taking those risks.
And knowing it's okay to make mistakes along the way.
Yeah, failing is part of the process, right? It's how we grow.
Totally. But ultimately, I think Nettles' message is about finding your voice and using it to tell stories that matter.
Whether it's on stage, on screen, or anywhere else.
It's about having something to say and not being afraid to say it.
Which is a powerful lesson, don't you think?
It is. So as we wrap up this episode, I have to say I'm really glad we took this deep dive into John Nettles' world.
Me too. He's a fascinating guy with a lot of insight and experience to share.
And even though he's retired from acting, he's still making us think and question things, which is pretty cool.
It is. It shows you the power of a thoughtful voice, even after the spotlight fades.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time on Fame Files.